In a number of the dialogues, we see Socrates discussing philosophical issues with one of the sophists. As we've seen, these were traveling teachers of rhetoric who, for a fee, would tutor the promising youths of Athens in the skills that they would need to succeed in the social and political life of the city. Socrates was occasionally associated with the sophists since he was often seen hanging around with young men and discussing things with them. But Socrates radically rejects this association. He's always quick to point out that he neither teaches anything nor demands a fee. He has no pupils in the sense of paying students. His is the pure pursuit of philosophical wisdom for its own sake. The dialogue Gorgias is one of these dialogues which presents Socrates arguing with the sophists. Gorgas of Leontini was a celebrated thinker who came to Athens to ply his trade. He's portrayed by Plato as an expert rhetorician who can seduce people with his words. In Athens, Gorgias stays with his friend Callicles, who also participates in the discussion. With Callicles and Socrates' friend Chaerephon, they decide to find Gorgias and speak with him. The argument covers a lot of ground and quickly moves from one topic on to the next: rhetoric, art, justice, and so on. This has caused some commentators to question the unity of the work. It's been suggested that the main motif, if there is one, is the debate about the best form of life, with Socrates advocating the life dedicated to philosophy and Callicles arguing for the practical life of the orator or politician. With regard to the structure of the dialogue, Gorgias is the main figure initially, but then he gives way to first Polus and then Callicles, who each in turn takes up the discussion. Thus, the Gorgias can be divided into three parts in accordance with the three different interlocutors of Socrates. In the course of the discussion, Callicles becomes critical of Socrates. He argues that Socrates confuses human law or convention, nomos, with nature, physis. Callicles insists that convention and nature are radically different and must be kept separate. He claims that Socrates misleads his audience by confusing the two. Callicles' argument is that when we look at nature, we see the strongest animals dominate the weaker ones. In this world, it's good to dominate and oppress the weaker animal, and it's bad to be the object of this domination and oppression. Thus, to suffer wrong is a shameful thing, since it seems to imply that one does not have the courage or the strength to stand up for oneself. Callicles claims, quote, "The experience of suffering wrong does not happen to a real man, but to a slave who is better off dead than alive," end quote. But in human society, this is inverted since the weaker people band together in order to constrain the stronger ones from causing them harm. To this end, they create artificial laws and institutions in order to rein in the stronger people. Callicles argues, quote, "Conventions are made by the weaklings who form the majority of mankind. They establish them and apportion praise and blame with an eye to themselves and their own interests. And in an endeavor to frighten those who are stronger and capable of getting the upper hand, they say that taking an excess of things is shameful and wrong, and that wrongdoing consists in trying to have more than others." Thus, human laws and conventions serve the function of restraining the strong people from doing whatever they like, and thus oppressing the weak ones. This might seem fair from the perspective of the weak people, but Callicles argues that this is an inversion of the true natural order of things. To his mind, this is a form of oppression of the strong people. He states his thesis as follows, quote, "Nature demonstrates that it is right that the better man should have more than the worse and the stronger than the weaker." He provides a number of examples to illustrate his thesis, which he believes is readily apparent when one observes the animal world or the way in which states behave towards one another. Callicles refers to the Persian Wars and asks, quote, "By what right, for example, did Xerxes invade Greece and his father Scythia? My conviction is that these actions are in accordance with nature. Indeed, by Zeus, I would go so far as to say that they are in accordance with natural law, though not perhaps with the law enacted by us," end quote. To say that it was perfectly right and just that the king of Persia invaded Greece with an army is a radical claim for a Greek to be making. Callicles invokes directly the notion of natural law that we discussed earlier in connection with Sophocles. He criticizes the Athenian educational system as a way of breaking the spirit of the strong people and rendering them harmless to the weak. But this distorts the nature of these people. He claims, quote, "Our way is to take the best and the strongest among us from an early age and endeavor to mold their character as men tame lions. We subject them to a course of charms and spells and enslave them by saying that men ought to be equal and that this is fine and right," end quote. Seen from this perspective, democracy is not a progressive political model, but rather one that leads to oppression, namely the oppression of the strong. He thus claims that human conventions are unnatural laws that distort the true nature of the strong and noble. Callicles invokes the same passage from Pindar that we discussed in connection with Herodotus. It will be recalled that Herodotus took Pindar's statement, "Custom is the king of all," to mean that people's lives are strongly determined by the customs that they are brought up with. So on this interpretation, this is a statement of moral or cultural relativism. But Callicles takes this in exactly the opposite sense. He interprets it to mean that the law of nature dictates that the strong take what they want and that might makes right. What is at issue here is what custom or law refers to in Pindar. If it is human custom and convention, then this would seem to speak for Herodotus' interpretation. But if it is natural law, then this would support Callicles' view. Callicles claims that the poem goes on to refer to how Heracles took the cattle of the giant Geron by brute strength, and this supports his view. Unfortunately, we have only this fragment of Pindar's poem, and so it's difficult to adjudicate the controversy.